Welcome back to the Champion's Path, and the Arnold Classic 2023 is just around the corner. With all the hype building up and the speculation building onto who's going to win, I wanted to go back to a previous Arnold Classic. I think this show that we're going to look at today is really underrated. In fact, not only was it one of the better Arnold Classic competitions, but I do think, since this show was 6 years ago, I think out of those past 6 years, this may be one of the best competitions outside of Mr. Olympia's that we've had. Today, we will be discussing the Arnold Classic Europe 2017. First off, what makes this show so impressive is the lineup. Just your top 5, and I'm going to spoil it, so it's going to be Big Ramy in first, William Bonac in second, Shawn Rhoden in third, Rolly Winkler in fourth, and Nate Diasha in fifth. Just in that lineup, there are 2 Mr. Olympia champions, an Arnold Classic Ohio champion. This lineup was stacked. So the stacked lineup obviously accounts for like 90% of how cool it was, but the other 10% and why the show is so good is made up by the stage. Most of the stage is covered by a black backdrop, which is what the fans have always been clamoring for, right? It's the best to make comparisons against. It doesn't misconstrue skin colors of one person versus another, and the lighting on top of this black background really brought out the detail in everybody. Everyone was able to be judged fairly and in the best lighting possible. This is a show that isn't really talked about a whole lot. A lot of the Arnold Classic Ohio titles are, 2016 when Kai won is a very popular show. 2017 when Cedric won is a pretty popular one. However, because this is an Arnold Classic Europe title, not too many people pay attention to it, and that's why I do believe it's underrated. So in today's video, we're just going to kind of go over the footage, right? Maybe do a little comparing and contrasting between the competitors, but with the scorecard, Big Ramy was pretty handedly in first. Second and third were kind of close, but really I agree with all the placings, so this isn't really going to be a rescoring of all those in my eyes. I'm just going to kind of admire, how good of a show this really was, how good the athletes were on that day. So let's get right into the comparison. So unfortunately for the first 2 poses, the front double and the front lat spread, we're going to have to use this off-angle footage simply because they had Rolly in the third place, in the middle before they had Shawn in there, but then they moved him. So we'll be able to use head-on footage for the next poses and most of them. So let's get right into the front double bicep. Now, honestly, like I said before, all of these guys brought it. Now, for what it's worth, since we can take a look at them right now, Nate Diasha, I know a lot of people don't like his freakishly long torso. However, there is something kind of appealing about it. And I mean, take a look at all these guys. None of them are off. But Nate just kind of looks a little awkward for what it's worth. He's pulling down his arms too much. I think he really needs to, lift his arms up a bit more and expose what V-taper he has because, he needs to make his lats appear as big as possible because they're higher. But honestly, very good quads. I would say some of the best quads up here. But it's really just amazing how good all of these guys are. Now, before we get into the main top 3, let's go over to Rolly Winkler. He just seems a little bit smooth. Too much water, but he's just massive. From lat to lat, I really do think he may be bigger than Big Ramy, which is actually just amazing. But Rolly is a mass monster, and look at those arms. Those are huge. Maybe the most massive arms, bicep to tricep here. Absolutely amazing. But let's get into the top 3, which is Bonac, Ramy, and Shawn. So, unfortunately, Bonac with this angle is getting the short end of the stick because he's the furthest away, which makes him look a bit smaller than he is. And you can see the opposite of this when you look at Shawn, because Shawn is the closest to the camera and maybe even a bit closer to the judges on stage, which makes him look as big as Big Ramy, which we simply know is not true. Okay, so I do think Bonac is winning this pose. He has the most bubbly muscles, and I mean, we all know that with Bonac, right? In terms of the arms, out of this top 3, he has the best arms. I can certainly see an argument for Shawn because they're a bit fuller. Bonac's are a bit shorter, but I like the peaks of Bonac's more, right? Those peaks, and you can just tell if you look pretty closely and zoom in maybe, you can see the separation between the biceps and the triceps. The conditioning is really there for Bonac. I'm pretty sure he's the most conditioned at the show. And then the waist, which is usually his Achilles heel, is, wouldn't you know it, sunken in. No bubble guts here, at least at this time. His waist is not a vacuum, but it's sunken in to kind of give that appearance. It's still nowhere near a vacuum, but it is sunken in. And it's not the smallest, but that definitely does help because any protrusion is basically him signing his death warrant in this shot. Now on the quads, I do think his quads look the best in this pose. He has the most detail, and again, they're going to be the fullest, roundest, the most pop. Big Rami's are biggest in terms of mass, but that isn't always the winner, especially with Big Ramy because the detail has always been a problem with him. But we'll get to other shots. He definitely brought the detail more than he has, at this point, past and present. I think this was a pretty good showing for Big Ramy. I mean, he after all did win. And then for Sean Roden, the best abs, right? He's doing a crunch down ab shot showing that almost 8-pack. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, basically an 8-pack. And then you have, and then the quads. I think he could flex them a little better and look more comparable to Bonak's. But I do think he's in second place here simply because he has the better arms than Big Ramy and he's cutting a better outline. Big Ramy just kind of looks put together in a Frankenstein sense. Not that that's bad. He simply just looks more like a bodybuilder. Why Sean Roden has the more aesthetic, prettier physique. And then I feel like William Bonac is a combination of both. So I'm going to have to put Big Ramy in third if I were judging. Ramy third, Sean Roden second, and then William Bonac in first. Now going into the front lat spread. This is usually a knockout pose for Sean. And we'll get to the literal goddamn elephant in the room, but let's admire Sean a little bit. He really cuts the best illusion, and let me explain this. So he has the widest shoulders, well, besides Big Ramy. Like I said, we'll get to the elephant in the room. He has the widest shoulders, second widest shoulders, and then the smallest waist on that stage. And then he has these big quads, very good quads. His quads don't get talked about enough. But so the quads make the waist look smaller, and then the wideness of the shoulders not only gives him more lat flare to play with genetically, but it also makes the waist look smaller. So you have this ongoing illusion where the legs make the waist look smaller, the shoulders make the waist look smaller, and this makes the lat flare look even bigger. So he cuts the best illusion here. He may not have the most pound for pound lat flare, but he's not only has pretty good lat flare, he's getting carried heavily by that, and that's not a bad thing. It's not an insult. He just has that illusion, right? And that's part of the game. Structure is a part of the game. You can't change it. You just gotta admire when someone has an amazing structure. Let's pass over Big Ramy. Let's go to William Bonac. I think William Bonac is going to be, he definitely is last place. Narrow clavicles and the widest waist. This limits his lat flare, right? Although, let's say he even had the widest lats here, which I don't think he does, but let's say he had the widest lats, the most lat flare. I simply don't think we would notice because the narrow clavicles and the thicker waist holding him back. So I'd put him in third, Sean in second. And why did I not even name first place? Because just passing over it to go look at William Bonac, I could clearly tell that this is Big Ramy's pose. His quads look a little better here. I gotta address everything else before I get into the lats. His quads look a little bit better here. He's flexing a lot better. Not only is the condition there, but they just seem dry and grainy. He is the grainiest out of every guy here, which I find very fascinating. I don't really remember him having this grainy condition, but he's dry here. Like he looks like he's carved out of granite almost. He just has that very grainy look, which I'm very surprised by. And then let's go up to the shoulders. Well, first trail up the waist. This is not the waist of a 300-pound dude. This waist is. Think of other close to 300-pound bodybuilders. This waist is below average of those guys. So it makes him look even crazier. And then we get up to the pecs. Fairly good amount of detail from the shoulder to shoulder and pretty good arms. But then the lat flare. While Sean may have the best illusion and the best structure, Big Ramy has the most lat flare, lat mass. Like he is just blowing everybody out of the water. Absolutely amazing. He wins this pose hands down. There are no arguments in my mind for Sean Roden. As much as I love Sean Roden, I simply have to think that this is a knockout pose for Big Ramy. And that's saying something beating Sean Roden. That's saying something. Now because we won't get to the other two in the other video, let's look at Rolly Winkler. Unfortunately, he just kind of maybe has a mobility issue where he's not pulling back so much. So the arms, because he has those massive arms, are literally overpowering his lat flare. Like they're sneaking into his lat flare and hiding his lat flare, which I think is funny. But he does have a lot of detail in the chest, which I'm really pleased by, really pleased to look at. The quads, though, are a bit underwhelming. It's just because everyone here has 10 out of 10 quads. And then Nate Diasha, big, bubbly chest, very bubbly chest, pretty good abs, and then the legs are good there as well. Now, the problem with Nate is that, he just has those higher lats. But, to be fair, Rolling Winkler has pretty good lats, and you can't see them because his arms are overshadowing it. But for whatever's worth, all of these guys are great. Very surprised, very stacked lineup even with Nate Diasha and Rolly Winkler rounding out that top 5. Now we're going to use the main video I plan on using, so they have all of them right in a row and more of a zoomed in angle. So they go straight into the side chest after this. This is actually the same call out we were just looking at, just from the official angle, I believe. So now we have Sean in the middle for the side chest pose. This is a Bonac pose, hands down. I really like the way he hits it. Monstrous. Like, look at the mountain peak of a bicep he has. Bubbly everywhere. Good detail on the chest and the side leg, all the way down to the side leg to the chest. Detail is good. And then the bubbliness of his chest, delts, and arms is there. Now, I'll probably have to put... Sean's a statue, right? But, his arms are a little weak. He knows that, and that's why he's lifting his delt up. And that gives his delt puts more focus on his delt, and then takes focus away from his arm. And Big Ramy, he looks a little awkward in this pose. He hit it for like a couple seconds, but then kind of shied away from it, which is unfortunate because he has very good delts, arms, and I'll say this, I've said this before and I'll say it again, one of the best side legs in the game. Like that may be the best side leg of all time. I think for completeness of the pose, Bonac is in first. It's kind of take your pick. I don't know if I can reward such bad posing if I were a poser, if I were a judge. He should have practiced this a little more. So for that reason, I could see an argument for Sean. Very good pecs on Sean, pretty good delt, and a very good side leg. It's not Big Ramy level, but the detail is there. But for the overall mass and detail, Big Ramy's side leg is better. Like I said, you can kind of take your pick. Sean Roden looks like a statue, and I'm a Sean Roden fanboy. In fact, this is my favorite physique currently. Like everyone has their favorite physique. Right now, mine is Sean Roden from the Arnold Classic 2017 Europe. Amazing posing routine. I will touch on that at the end. But I'd probably give this to Big Ramy, surely for the mass, right? Mass versus maybe a bit more class. I think Ramy brings enough class, though, to get him in a second place. Again, take it with a grain of salt. So now they're moving Bonac into the middle. And why is that? Because it's time for the back shots. And if you guys know William Bonac, this is where he shines. So we'll get into the Christmas trees in a sec because I think they hit it better later. But you can just tell that this is Bonac's pose, right? Let's start bottom to top. So the calves, which is very surprising, right? Big Ramy's calves do not look very good. Sean Roden's calves are there. I would say they're pretty much on par with William Bonac's. William Bonac has the best hamstrings, not only the best, but they're also the leanest. And then the glutes, the most striated glutes. It's not a striated glute contest, but it kind of is. That's a telltale sign of conditioning, and he has it, right? When you go up to the lower back, no fat, no water. It's not like striated, but again, you can tell there's no fat, no water. So really, you can't ask for too much more. And then, like I said earlier, those flying squirrel lats. Absolutely amazing. He has, those lats that literally insert into his goddamn ass crack at this point. It really reminds you of Franco Columbu. And then back detail, pretty good. Traps, all right. And then the peaks on the biceps. He has pretty peaked biceps, so you have two humps on each arm. One for the front delt and another smaller, thinner peak for the biceps. Very pleasing. Bonac's pose, hands down. Now, next one. Now, for second place, Sean Roden is more conditioned by far. However, his back is probably a bit weaker than Big Ramy. And wouldn't you, can you imagine saying that? Like, take a look at Big Ramy nowadays and take a look at what he doesn't have today. Those horns and his glutes, not there. Lats, the insertions are actually there. His triceps are a bit fuller. They're not atrophied. This is an amazing pose for him at this time. Maybe not an amazing pose, but compared to 2022, yeah, it is quite an amazing pose. Unfortunately, it took a turn for the worse instead of the, getting better. But, I mean, he has a pretty good back. Let's be honest, pretty good. I think it was a bit better. The problems were already kind of creeping up on him at this point. I think they were maybe a bit better. Like, even as early as his pro debut, which is like the New York Pro, I think his back was even better then. I think he's just gotten less and less fresh over time. So he's less conditioned than Sean Roden, but probably has a better back, although Sean Roden's conditioning really makes his back look a little bit better. This is going to be maybe a little bit controversial. I'd probably give this to Big Ramy simply for the more mass. Right now, I'm just a little bit more partial to mass, although Sean Roden looks better. I'll just say that. Sean Roden looks better. Big Ramy has the mass. Take your pick. And then the back lat spread. First, let's get into their Christmas trees. Okay? So, Big Ramy's Christmas tree doesn't look all that great. William Bonac's is there. That is a true blue Christmas tree, right? And then when, he hits this pose, the glutes, hamstrings are there. Big Ramy's, although it's kind of there, he's just carrying a film of water from the back. It's not that he doesn't have them like he doesn't now, I guess. It's just he's carrying a little bit of water. And that was the thing with Ramy back in the day. We were all like, well, he can be Mr. Olympia as soon as he gets rid of the water. I think he would have been Mr. Olympia sooner if Phil Heath wasn't around. And then Sean Roden's, that is also a true blue Christmas tree. His striations are just like a bit smaller, and that's just a genetic thing. They're not as deep. But I mean, that's a true blue Christmas tree. Probably better. Yeah, it is better than what we see nowadays. And this was only 6 years ago. Now for the back lat spread, they all do very well. This is a pose where I do think they all do pretty similarly. But I mean, to be fair, that's been most of the poses. Big Ramy, massive. Absolutely massive. And his hamstrings and glutes look way better here. Look at them in the back double versus the rear lat spread. Hamstrings and glutes are finally in now. He's just flexing them a bit better. And he has, when you don't have to do a back double where the detail's a little bit more apparent, you can kind of get away with having the film of water. In some ways, it may even help you a little bit. It makes maybe it can make you look slightly bigger, slightly. You can't go overboard with that, but a film of water is definitely going to hurt you in the back double. It's definitely not going to be so much apparent in the rear lat spread. So, very good pose out of Big Ramy. Honestly, this is very good. Traps are there, rear delts, rhomboids, bulging, amazing. I think this is William Bonac's pose, though, simply because, again, those flying squirrel lats, you can kind of see a little bit of striations here in the lower back, and then, again, hamstrings, glutes are the tightest and driest. Sean Roden is pretty good, too. He probably has the most detail in the erectors, and then if he would maybe concentrate a little bit more, he'd maybe have some striations in there, too, and then good hamstrings, and then good glutes. Again, I have to pick Big Ramy. And this one is certainly an argument where I think mass wins because he's just wider. He's blowing. You know what? I may give this entire pose to Big Ramy. This is a split decision right here. But Big Ramy's impressing me so much simply because he's dwarfing all of their backs. Look at the amount of boom. Turtle shell back. It's like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. He has the biggest, widest back there simply because he's the biggest guy. Right? He doesn't have the best insertions. That's William Bonac. He doesn't have the most detail. That may be Sean Roden. Could be William Bonac. But he has the most mass and width. So I can certainly see an argument for him winning that pose, which is crazy to say. Because now he looks very awkward when he hits it. Let's go into the next pose, which is a very interesting one. Very interesting. Side tricep. I don't think any of these guys do remarkably well. Sean Roden has always had a very skinny tricep, kind of like Kai Green. And then Big Ramy, he simply looks like he lacks the mobility to get into the pose, right? He just looks a little uncomfortable. However, why he may not get most of his body in the pose, he gets his arm facing the judges into the pose, which is the most important, right? Look at that delt. That delt is crazy. The amount of it just looks wicked. Like, I can't think of another word to describe it but wicked. Like, the mass is there, the striation is there. And, very important point, he has the best tricep on that stage. Surely better than Sean Roden. And then also, obviously better than William Bonac, right? William Bonac just doesn't have the mass, or Big Ramy just has a better insertion. Better insertion than tricep and overall mass. Best delt is probably Big Ramy. I wish he had the mobility to do this, but even here, I think it looks good. Sick tricep. And then, of course, like I said earlier, perhaps the best side leg ever, all time. I'll probably have to give this to him. I like William Bonac's presentation. I think maybe he can do a little bit more to tighten up the glutes, but he does do a very good job of presenting. I wish more people presented it like this than how Sean Roden and then Big Ramy are doing it. I really like the Dorian-esque 1 foot back rather than just a side chest setup for the tricep pose. What I noticed the most is William Bonac's bicep is completely overpowering his tricep. And for what it's worth, that really kind of throws me off. Like, it's distracting. It's very distracting. And then Sean is in last. He does move to the where he twists to the front, so that way he puts more emphasis on his feathered quad and his abs. But, it's side tricep pose, doesn't have the tricep. That was Big Ramy's pose. And then they go into the abs and thighs. And we know William Bonac is never going to hit the head-on abs and thighs. We know that. And rightfully so, right? Like, he doesn't have the smallest waist and he doesn't have the best abs. He's going to twist to the side, which kind of highlights, makes his waist look a bit smaller. Takes, an inch off the waist from the illusion because it now showcases his thickness between the lat and the far shoulder. And he does have a lot of detail through the chest and the forearm as well. Good vascularity, good detail. And then, of course, he's bringing that quad out front, and that it's striated, it's huge. Very good choice for him. He should never hit the head on abs and thighs. But unfortunately, it is kind of cheating in a way. I mean, it's good posing, but, it's never going to beat a full head-on abs and thighs pose that's traditionally hit, in my opinion. I'm going to be partial to those guys first before I look to the other guys, which are kind of posing in a way that's not traditional. Now, what I think is very interesting is while Big Ramy crunches down immediately in the traditional way, he does what William Bonac does, and in my opinion, beats him at his own game. William Bonac doesn't have the best obliques here, but take a look at Big Ramy's. Like, that surprised me. That's like Hadi Chupin level oblique right there. Look at the serratus and look at the abs and the obliques. That it looks like a Japanese fan. Like, who are you, fucking Katana? It's amazing. And then why he doesn't have the amount of detail William Bonac did in the quads from the actual striations. He has enough detail in there, and then the mass carries him well past the finish line, a mile past the finish line. Look at the size of his quads, and then again the detail in the abs. That's amazing. But he does go around and hit it in the traditional way. So let's give a quick look at that so I can compare him to Sean Roden. So Sean Roden, this is usually his pose hands down. And although I may give Big Ramy a lot of props for the twisting shot, for the heads-on pose, this is Sean Roden, right? Those are washboard abs, if you ever seen any. That's his pose hands down. And why he doesn't have the biggest quads, Sean Roden, of course, he's standing next to Big Ramy. He has the amount of detail he needs and the amount of fullness in his quads. Like I said earlier, Sean Roden's quads are underrated. Like, those things are pretty, not only big and have a very good amount of sweep on them, but they have the detail. And then his abs, like I said, washboard 8-pack, it's amazing. Big Ramy, though, you could compare it to his pose at the 2022 Mr. Olympia. His 2022 abs and thighs pose was really awkward, not that good. His abs were washed out, but they had gristly skin over them, so I don't really know if it was a layer of water. But look at these quads. No holes in the quads, right? Maybe a little bit here starting. I think it was a genetic thing. Not entirely sure. But these quads, detailed, not quite all the way up the hip like Sean's are, but they have a fair amount of detail. And then, like I said, they're pretty grainy. Look at the vascularity, right? But in the abs, you just can't beat Sean Roden in the abs. Sean's pose, hands down. Now let's get into the last pose. We have two similar ones in Sean and Big Ramy, and then William Bonac. I think I gotta give this to William Bonac for the detail. Like, Big Ramy is obviously more muscular. Like, this is the most muscular pose. Big Ramy is the most muscular. Simply, like, overall mass. But pound for pound, this may be William Bonac. Like, William Bonac may be bigger than Big Ramy pound for pound. And not only that, not only is it pretty considerable when you look at it like that, but the detail. Look at the quads. There's a little bit of striations in the quads. There's striations in the delts, in the chest. Massive arms, bubbly delts, amazing. That's his pose. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, actually. Unapologetically, that's his pose. Now, who surprises me is Sean Roden. So they're both doing a hands-on hip here. And Big Ramy, very good quads. You know, his abs, I think he could do a little bit better job crunching down on them. His delts are capped out there. Doesn't have the detail in the chest. And arms are okay. And then we go to Sean Roden. Probably bigger delts. They're definitely popping a bit more. Arms are there. More detail in the chest and better abs. And then more detail in the legs. Again, Ramy has bigger legs. But the detail in Sean Roden's legs is top to bottom. Knee to hip. And that's very impressive. It's hard to do. Right? You need to be in condition for that. You know, and you need to train in the weight room for that. You know, people train leg extensions and they think they're doing a good job. You need to go all the way up and all the way, down so you can really get the top part all the way to the hip. You need to build that. And Big Ramy, he just doesn't have the detail at the hip. So honestly, I'd probably put Sean Roden in second. But most muscular pose, if we're going for who's the most massive, why not put Big Ramy in second, I could certainly see that argument. I can see an argument for Sean Roden being in second. He's the most conditioned. So sure, put Big Ramy in second if you want. Put Sean Roden in second if you want. Let's be clear though, Bonac has both the condition and the mass. He's clearly in first. If, we were taking this seriously, it's really whatever. All of these guys bring something interesting to the table and bring something really good to the table. And all of these guys brought amazing packages. All right, so in most of my comparison videos, I actually rank the poses. Like where I give first, second, and third, I actually write it down and then give you the final score and my opinion on what it was if I were a judge sitting there, or at least with this angle. However, I don't really see the need to do that. All of these guys, like I said, brought amazing packages. The show was done. But to be fair, I probably did give Bonac most of the first placings. I'd have to go back and watch, but it really is like pick what you want. Like Sean Roden, amazing aesthetics. And like I said before, this currently, right now, is my favorite physique, right? Sometimes it changes, but the 2017 Arnold Classic Europe is absolutely amazing. He put on a spectacular posing routine. Actually, all of these guys put on pretty good posing routines, but I think that may just be partial to the lighting. It really makes everyone look so great, and they all brought good packages. But Sean Roden's posing routine, I still watch it, watch it before I go and train myself, or maybe I just watch it just because I find it very inspiring. I think it's honestly a very good, well-crafted routine. You have a little bit of the slowness in the beginning and a little more fast-paced action, and then a belly roll in there. Honestly, I hope that we can expect more shows like this. Not, 2 division shows or anything like that. Simply, I want more competitors, more top-tier competitors competing at more shows. This is the Arnold Classic Europe. This isn't the Arnold Classic Ohio. This isn't anything else. This is, for all intents and purposes, literally being a 2-division show is kind of a, it's not going to be bottom tier because it does have Arnold's name, but it's definitely not going to be top tier. And you know what? These guys still showed up and put on a great show. And this really reminds me of a period where I guess it doesn't really remind me. I wasn't around for it, but it definitely kind of reminds some of us of the 90s where these guys used to compete all the time. They would compete back to back in the European tours after the Olympia. They would all compete multiple times a year, at least during their on season when it was time to compete. They would not just do one show or maybe 2 shows to qualify for the Olympia and then the Olympia. They would do multiple shows, and I really miss that aspect of the 90s. Because when everyone shows up and brings a good package, but I do really mean show up, when the big names actually do show up, you get great little gems of shows like this. Like, this show is honestly probably one of my favorites, and that's really saying something, because I feel like the show quality has been going down. Stage production has been kind of going down, and the quality of the competitors, just because there's so many shows nowadays. People are going to do, you know, a very easy show to qualify for the Olympia, and then spend all the time, you know, prepping and then doing an off season for the Olympia. And I just really miss seeing competitors bring great packages, and a lot of competitors bringing great packages. Maybe in the future we'll see more of this. I know that regardless of whether we see it or not, I will still always come back to this footage and that Sean Roden posing routine and these call outs, because this was an amazing show. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Leave a comment if you have another show I should look at, one that you think is underrated. Leave a comment for what you thought about all three of these competitors who you had winning perhaps, and don't forget to like and subscribe. This is just a fun video, so there will be a video later in the week on Friday. That's my normal upload date now, Friday, so I just want to throw this in here. Again, can't say it enough. Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.